Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reviewing a tweet by Alexander Dugan. And this tweet is about the various civilizations and the likely upcoming conflict that is going to happen between these civilizations. So for those of you who don't know, Alexander Dugan is a philosopher, a political thinker within Russia. It doesn't seem like he directly has access to the Russian government, but he is someone who has been relatively prophetic in terms of his predictions of the future. And I do believe that the tweet I'm going to be going over today is something that is accurate for what is to come and the world kind of as a whole right now. And so he starts off this tweet talking about 7 civilizations in the world, and it is one civilization against 6 others. And the 6 others are everything except for the Western world. Okay, so he's talking about a summit held from the 22nd to 24th of August of 2023 in Johannesburg. The final formation of the multipolar club took place, and so that's the BRICS summit. The entry of 3 Islamic powers, Shia, Iran, and Sunni, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. This was fundamental to the 6 civilizations fighting against the 7th civilization. And so we're seeing the direct participation in the multipolar world of the entire Islamic civilization, represented by both branches, Sunniism and Shiaism. And so just to stop right there for a second, we have to think about what this means. And I'm just going to highlight this. So between Sunnis and Shias, the major powers, joining BRICS, joining that block of the world, and then you have the Israeli-Palestine conflict of 2023 occurring, which raises sympathies for Palestinians, given the situation that they're facing now with water being turned off, with food not being allowed in, with it already being the largest open-air prison in the world, with no electricity, et cetera, et cetera. The Islamic world is not only sympathetic to the causes of Palestine, to the situation in Palestine, but also the rest of the world, particularly the multipolar world bloc, is extremely sympathetic. And I made another video recently talking about how China, their foreign ministry, was talking about a 2-state solution. And it turns out Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin both came out with information really strongly calling for a 2-state solution as well. And so they're engendering support for the multipolar world bloc. On top of that, there's some really interesting things going on where you're seeing that people who are supporters of Russia and their perspective in the Ukraine conflict siding with the Palestinians to a large extent. And you're seeing people who were sympathetic to the Ukrainian side siding with the Israelis, and vice versa. People who are siding with the Palestinians are now siding entirely with, or mostly with, the multipolar world bloc. And so you have these two things, the BRICS joining of Shia and Sunni countries, major powers, and then you have the kind of coordination of the 2 conflicts going on, the Ukraine-Russia conflict and then the Israel-Palestine conflict. And so these sides are forming, and they're pretty strong in terms of their coordination, in terms of how they're acting, in terms of their online supporters. The one kind of separation is there does seem to be a certain amount of Russians or former Russians of Jewish descent who are supporting Israel. But aside from that relatively small faction of Russian Jews who are supportive of Russia, but also supportive of Israel, aside from that faction, you're actually seeing a massive coordination of multiple different factions across multiple different wars, and it's really making the dividing lines clear. And again, there is another loss for the Western world, for Western civilizations, in that it's the entire Islamic world uniting behind the multipolar world bloc, particularly because Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have come out in strong support of a Palestinian state. Okay, so let's go on. Thus, the direct participation in the multipolar world of the entire Islamic civilization, represented by both branches of Sunnism and Shiism, was assured. In addition, along with Portuguese-speaking Brazil, Spanish-speaking Argentina, and another strong and independent power joined BRICS. Okay, so obviously Brazil is the strongest Portuguese-speaking nation. Portugal itself is not a particularly strong nation right now. Argentina, I think you can make the argument that it is the strongest Spanish-speaking country in South America. I think people would contend that Mexico is potentially just as strong as Argentina within all of Latin America, of course. And in terms of Latin America, Brazil is obviously ahead of Argentina as well, particularly considering the economic problems that Argentina is facing. But having Argentina within the BRICS alliance is a huge, huge deal, because you have two of the three powers that I would say are the dominant powers within Latin America. You have Brazil and Argentina within that alliance. And I'm sure Mexico would have loved to join as well, but because of their closeness, their proximity to the United States, I think it was out of caution that they did not. And I think it's out of caution that BRICS didn't invite them as well. Because of the fact that the United States is already talking about invading Mexico on a semi-regular basis. I don't think they want to exacerbate that tension along Mexico's largest border. Okay, so even in the mid-20th century, theorists of South American unification into a consolidated greater space, primarily Argentine General Juan Perón and Brazilian President Getulio Vargas, considered a decisive rapprochement between Brazil and Argentina to be the first principle of this process. If this is achieved, the process of integration of the Latin American ecumen will be irreversible. Okay, so just some thoughts here is, we're seeing the Islamic world consolidate behind the multipolar world bloc, and now we are seeing the Latin American world consolidate behind the multipolar world bloc. I don't for people who are propagandized by the West, I'm just wondering, what are your, how do you grasp with the fact that you're losing across the board? No one likes you. I think there was a certain rallying around Ukraine for European powers. But aside from that, I don't see the Western world getting any wins recently. They've been constantly on the back foot. They've been constantly losing battles. And this is just another example of that. So I would like to see in the comment section, because I know I have a lot of boomers who watch my videos. How are you coping with the fact that your side is losing so massively right now? What is it? How are you even grasping? Are you taking in the fact that you're just losing across the board here? Because it'd be interesting. And then I talked about the Middle East and I talked about Latin America, but I don't think it's mentioned. Oh, it's mentioned a little bit in here talking about Africa, but they don't talk about the coups happening in Africa. And so there's military coups, where military powers that are aligned with the multipolar world bloc, they're winning their coups. And so you're seeing across Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, Asia proper, you're seeing the multipolar world bloc winning just across the board. I mean, sure, you have Europe, but what else do you have if you're a part of the Western world right now? Because it seems to be losses across the board. So I just want to hear the perspective of people who are believing all the Western propaganda right now. How are you coping with the fact that your side is losing so bad? Do you even believe what I just said? Is that registering with you at all? I'd love to hear in the comments. Please let me know. Okay. They're talking about a little bit here as well about how there could be a unification of Latin America. Obviously, America has not allowed that to happen, because that'd mean there's a competitor within the Americas, and they don't want to have a strong competitor within the Americas. So they've disrupted any unification efforts by Latin American powers. But with BRICS behind them, I think it's possible that they could actually have an alliance now. So that's very cool. Okay. That's exactly what's happening now. The admissions of Ethiopia is also highly symbolic. It is the only African country that remained independent throughout the colonial era, preserving its sovereignty, its independence, and its unique culture. Ethiopians are the oldest Christian people. Combined with South Africa, Ethiopia strengthened by its presence in the multipolar club, the African continent as a whole. Okay, so I do want to just highlight that and go over that for a second. So I talked about the coups benefiting the multipolar world because the coups are for anti-Western military people getting control of governments throughout Africa. But now we have not only South Africa, which I would say is one of the maybe 4 top players within Africa, and then you have, they're already obviously a part of BRICS, but then you have Ethiopia, the oldest Christian country and one of the few countries to escape colonialism because they defeated Italy, joining BRICS. You have Ethiopia joining BRICS. The other 2 countries that I think are major powers here within Africa are Nigeria, which is pretty strongly within the Western camp. It's Western controlled. It's a very large country, but it is extremely divided between its Christian and Muslim populations. And then you have Egypt, which Egypt is another one. It's a Muslim country, and it's a major power within what would be considered the greater Middle East area, which includes North Africa, but then also a major power, obviously, within Africa, because it is the northeasternmost point within Africa. And so 2 of the 4 are in there, are in BRICS now. In fact, the new composition of BRICS gives us a complete model of uniting all poles, civilizations, greater spaces, with the exception of the West, which desperately seeks to preserve its hegemony and unipolar structure. But now it faces non-disparate and fragmented countries full of internal and external contradictions, but a united force of the majority of humanity determined to build a multipolar world could fight with the West. This multipolar world consists of the following civilizations. Okay, so here's the multipolar world. The West, which is the United States and the European Union and their vassals, which includes, alas, the once proud and sovereign Japan, now degraded to passive puppet of the Western conquerors. And you could also say that South Korea is in there as well. Australia, New Zealand, right? Then you have China and Taiwan, plus Taiwan with its satellites as another civilization. Then you have Russia as an integrator of the entire Eurasian space, and so the Russian civilization, India and its zone of influence, Latin America with the core of Brazil and Argentina, and then I'd also throw Mexico in there. Africa, which is South Africa, Ethiopia, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger. And he does mention a little bit these coups, liberated from French colonial influence. And so he doesn't really go into the fact that there's a couple major African powers who have not joined BRICS yet, but it's likely that in the next round of BRICS, I think Egypt will join in the next round. Turkey may join in the next round, depending on how strong Turkey and Mexico is. It's depending on how strong the West is and how much BRICS wants to push the West, because if they're willing to push the West, then they could have both of those countries join as well. Vietnam is another country that I think in the next round will probably join as well. Is the Islamic world is another civilization in both versions, Shia Iran and Sunni Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. At the same time, one civilization, the Western one, claims hegemony, while the other 6 deny it, accepting only a multipolar system and recognizing the West as the only one of the civilizations, along with the others, may still be the strongest, relatively not for too long, but not unique. So the rightness of Samuel Huntington, who saw the future in the return of civilizations, has been confirmed in practice. While the fallacy of Fukuyama's thesis, who believed that the global hegemony of the liberal West, the end of history, has already been achieved, has become obvious. And so the West is still operating under the assumption that they're at the end of history. They can take on Russia, they can take on China, they can fight the entire Muslim world while defending Israel. And that's just not happening. It's unequivocally, like I can say with a high degree of confidence that that's not going to happen. The West is just not winning this. Aside from all-out nuclear war where no one wins, there's a very clear Western world that is not winning this. Therefore, Fukuyama is left only doomed to lecture the Ukrainian neo-Nazis, the last hope of globalists to stop the onset of multipolarity, for which Russia and Ukraine is fighting today. August 2023 can be considered the birthday of the multipolar world. Multipolarity is established and somehow institutionalized. It is time to take a closer look at how civilizational poles themselves interpret the situation in which they find themselves. And here we should take into account that virtually every sovereign civilization has its own ideas of structure of history, the nature of historical time, its direction, the goal, and the end. Contrary to Fukuyama, who ambitiously proclaimed a single end of history in his liberal version, each sovereign civilization operates with its own understanding, interpretation, and description of the end of history. Okay, so this is obviously from Alexander Dugan. If you want to hear more from me on these various civilizations and what I consider to be kind of their perspectives and their win conditions, please let me know in the comment section. I would love to talk more about that. Just as kind of like a side note on that, I do think India and its civilizational state is kind of the one that might pivot towards the Western camp. It's right on the fence right now, but you see others like Africa, the Muslim civilization, the Latin American civilization, all of those are very definitively pivoting towards the multipolar bloc. India is the one where they very clearly dislike the Indian Hindu civilization, very much dislikes the Muslim civilization, and so they might pivot towards the Western bloc just to oppose who they consider to be their enemy, which is very unfortunate, but that is the current state of affairs there. But aside from the Indian civilization, every other one is unequivocally in the multipolar world bloc at this point. So interesting stuff. Thank you for sticking with me. I love doing this type of content, and please give us a thumbs up in the algorithm. Please subscribe to our channel for more content. And if you have any comments, questions, critiques, I love talking to all of you in the comment section. So thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.